Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Advancing Open Science panel. My name is Cameron Riddell, and today I will be emceeing our panel where we have two phenomenal leaders in the open science community who will be sharing their insights and experiences in advancing open science. Before I introduce our incredible leaders for our panel, I want to go over just a couple of items with you all, our audience. If you have any questions that you want to be answered or addressed by our panel, please use the Q&A widget in your Zoom window. Alternatively, if you want to chat with your fellow audience members or even chat with our panelists, you can use the chat widget. But we do ask that if you have a question that you want us to discuss, use that Q&A widget. With that all being said, I would love to go ahead and introduce our rest of our panelists. Let's start with Dr. Laura Acion from MetaDocencia. Now, Laura, I see that you're a research scientist at the National Research Council in the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, and you lead the Responsible Use of Data Collaboratory. But on top of that, Laura, could you tell us a little bit else about yourself, your current role, and your experience with virtual training?
Thank you, Cameron. It's great to be here. Welcome, everybody. Well, I mean, to be honest, my research branch that you just mentioned is a little bit on pause because the main of my time is going to co-direct MetaDocencia, which is a nonprofit organization that I and others and I co-founded in 2020. We started to teach how to teach online then, based on an experience that, I mean, my first teaching assignment ever in my career, that it's around 20. I've been around in academia for 30 years, a little bit more.
Wow.
I started very, very young, and I'm not that young anymore. We won't go there. So my first teaching assignment was a virtual assignment.
Really?
I had to teach Intro to Biostats in 2013 for the University of Iowa, where I completed my PhD. So I started and back then there was no Zoom, no cameras in every device. And it was there where I discovered two passions: one for teaching, and the other one for doing it online, because I found it was a very democratizing principle. So I hope I addressed your question.
Yeah. And Laura, I am curious though, before we introduce Leanna, how many people in your biostats class, the 2013 class? Was it a large class?
It was a summer course, and it was about 70 folks, maybe.
Wow.
Something like that. It was not a massive course, and it had a lot of synchronous components and then office hours, but it was taught through Blackboard or something. I mean, it's been over 10 years, so sorry, the details are blurry and I don't want to lie, but
Yeah. No, it is perfectly all right, Laura. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. It is an absolute honor to have someone with, one, so much open science and research experience, but also two, so much experience with virtual trainings as well. Next up on our panel, we also have Leanna Kalinowski. Now, Leanna, I see here that you are a Civic Science Fellow in Neuroscience and at AI at Neuromatch, and you develop strategies to help early career computational scientists integrate civic science practices. And so, Leanna, could you tell us just a little bit more about yourself, your current role, and your experience with virtual training?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me here. Going back into my background, I come from a neuroscience and public health background. And I always knew back then that I wanted to teach in some way, shape, or form. Originally that was wanting to be a university professor. And, throughout some different extracurriculars and stuff, I realized that I did not want to be a college professor anymore, but I did start diving into things like science outreach and things like that in the classroom. So I really started as like a tutor and a statistics teacher and stuff like that. And eventually it went to teaching kids through an organization called Let's Talk Science, and like hands-on scientific experiments and things like that. And then I went from kids to teaching scientists about science policy and science communication. And now here at Neuromatch, I direct our Open Science 101 courses. We've graduated over 300 students from our program so far. And I'm almost exclusively in a virtual environment now.
Well, that is amazing to hear. It sounds like you have quite the career, especially in teaching. And so I'm very excited to have you join us today. Now, for those who are interested in my own background, I also have a little bit of research experience where I was at graduate school at UC Davis studying human memory. Since then, I have transitioned into being a Python consultant and trainer, but I could not keep academia away. I simply love the environment and I love the people in it. And so I jumped back into being academia adjacent by doing open science training, and especially all of the virtual trainings that I do, both for my day role as well as NASA TOPS mission. But with all of our panelists introduced, let's go ahead and ask some of the hard questions here. Now, for every question that I ask, I will share it on my screen so that both our panelists as well as you and our audience know what question we're talking about at any given moment. So I'll go ahead and share my screen with the first question. Behind me, you'll see my screen. I'll hide here in the corner so you can read it as well. So the first question I'd love to open up for all of our panelists is, what significant challenges have you encountered in delivering effective virtual training, and how have you navigated them? And mind you, for our audience, if you do have questions or extensions of this question, please do use the Q&A widget or use the chat widget to let us know. But again, what significant challenges have you encountered in delivering effective virtual trainings, and how have you navigated them? I'll open this up to our panelists, Leanna and Laura.
Well, I think that the biggest challenge is keep it active and participatory. And I think there's a myth about that this is only a problem of virtual. I think that's a problem also in a lot of in-person trainings that we have taken and gone through and did over the years. So I think organizing an active training, both in person and virtual, takes a lot of previous work and planning and interest in the fact that it becomes active and that the students, the trainees participate actively. So, but there's something out there that indicates, this is a very unpopular opinion that I'm living here, but that in person it's easier to do this. So given that you have a stable internet connection and a stable access to the internet, which is a big given in some areas, my bet is that whatever you can do in person for making an active training and keeping folks interested during the interactions with the trainers can be replicated online with adequate resources. And that's and MetaDocencia tries to navigate that and counteract that with, I can share specifics, but I really would like to hear Leanna on this one as well.
Yeah, so Leanna, let's hear your kind of overall thoughts, and then we'll go into specifics like how do you keep your audience or your students actively involved in the training?
Sure. So before diving into this question, I want to give a little bit more context about Neuromatch. We are a global community. So our open science courses, I just crunched the numbers this morning. We've so far reached learners across 60 countries and 6 continents. And, that's great. It's really exciting. But with such a reach like that, that also introduces technical challenges that Laura briefly touched on. And, looking at our numbers, 50% of our students report some sort of internet stability issue, and 40% of them live in a country that blocks access to some of the tools that we like to use, like Zoom or Discord or Google products. So that alone, you can't even get into the interactive side of things before even addressing those issues. So for us, it's a lot about making sure that you have multiple modes of communication and sharing your materials. So for instance, we have a static course website where our students can read extended versions of our course materials and stuff like that. And yeah, like huge piece. And totally agree with what Laura said about interactivity and how things that happen in person can also happen online. Going back into my time with Let's Talk Science, I started with them while we were in person still. And during the pandemic, we got shut down and had to adapt everything to be online. So things that we used to march into classrooms with a box full of like pipe cleaners and things like that for students to do their hands-on science activities. And it got to a point where we couldn't do that anymore. And we didn't have the funds to start mailing things to people either. So a lot of sitting down and thinking like, okay, if we had kindergartners build bridges with books, what can we do now with the stuff that they'll have at home?
Yeah. Yeah. And even that's right is itself kind of an accessibility issue because you make this whole curriculum based on what you assume maybe the average or the median student would have at home. And then you find out, some students in your class don't have those things. And so I see that this type of accessibility or equity issues, right, with open science as well, and even with the trainings that I've been doing, and I'm sure you both have experienced the same. But Leanna, I'm curious, for those students, that kindergartner example you just shared, what would you do for maybe the underprivileged students who might not have some of the things at home?
Yeah, so a lot of it would be, if you don't have a pipe cleaner, then maybe you have a straw. Or if you don't have a straw, maybe you have a piece of paper that you can roll up and put into the shape of that. So a lot of work up front and sitting down with every single material that we had on those material lists and coming up with an alternate for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that you do it up front and not, on the fly, like, oh no, you don't have pipe cleaner. That's excellent to hear. But I would love also to hear from both of our panelists what you do during your virtual trainings for TOPS. How do you keep your students, your audience engaged with your material?
Well, one of them, and kind of going back, because yes, Leanna, we do share the same challenges. And so we do offer a lot of flexibility. I mean, and ideally, you would try in part of training the best of it. And there's a big buzzword this time and age of AI, of personalized learning. I mean, the closest you can get to a one-on-one, it's like if you can have a private tutor, that's how you learn best. But you need the social aspect of it. But let's keep it on the side. Um, so you so flexibility, so given different avenues, so if you cannot be in a synchronous encounter, you can see the recording, or you can participate in this other way, or I mean, so giving different options and allows to personalize in a way the offer. So that's something we do with to counteract internet instability, which is a huge access barrier. Also for TOPS. I mean, this is in general, but it does apply on what we are doing for NASA TOPS. And you said earlier, Cameron, well, you assume, well, we try not to assume, we ask first. We do, there's this thing of ask, don't assume, that we have been teaching since 2020 in MetaDocencia. Like, run a short survey and ask your folks uh, if they have the different things that you may need, and if not, if you do this with time, then you can plan and and can offer alternatives to the pipe cleaner, or so. And also, so it takes a lot of planning ahead. It cannot be an afterthought. So that's another aspect. So other tricks for maintaining an active, so say the person can attend asynchronous space and has a stable internet. Something that has been happening is folks, I mean, that I hear my colleagues often, oh, folks don't turn their cameras on. It's like now we cannot see those that are on the other side of the webinar, and they are. I mean, I can see you, Cameron and Leanna. It's very helpful to see the notes, right? Because it's otherwise it's like doing a radio show, not a presentation or a teaching, if we don't have this visual feedback. So, but unfortunately, for some reason, online is. Oh, I mean, even, and I'm talking about folks that can appear on camera and that have internet stability, because if you don't, then it's understandable. Or if you want privacy, that's super understandable as well. But those who can tend to turn the camera off, so they are not part of the conversation somehow. I don't know, this thing that been increasing. It was hard at the beginning in 2020 to make cameras on, but then when you explain how more difficult it is to talk to an audience without the visual feedback, then cameras are starting to get on. And now, for some reason, folks are going back to turning off their cameras. So encouraging a lot, and kind of seeding the empathy for those who are teaching. Like, if I cannot see you, it's very difficult for me to see if you're understanding what I say or not at all. And you can always use a chat, but that's a little bit more cumbersome for some folks as well. So open, turn your ask, don't assume, turn on your cameras. And the other one is formative assessments as you go. Like every 10-15 minutes, we ask about what we just taught in different ways to detect if what we just said was came through as we wanted or not. If it didn't, we discuss. And so it's just a quick multiple choice question or an activity. Or the other one thing that helps a lot, and it's a trainee favorite, is the breakout room. So we stop talking and they get to talk to each other on peer training. And that's another way to personalize it, because like everyone understands something wrong in a different way. So and so that's another one, and that's a huge one. Everyone loves the exchanges in smaller rooms, in smaller groups. So those are some of the ways that we have been applying in our virtual training for NASA DOPS.
Yeah, excellent. And Laura, for reference, how large are the training groups that you do with MetaDocencia?
Well, we open up the trainings up to 150 registrations, but since they are free, we have had a record of 50% of that showing. I mean, like 70 folks showing on the synchronous. So, and I think this doesn't scale a lot beyond that number unless we do put more folks. That's why we keep the registration cap. But yeah, with up to, you can, I mean, if it's a lot bigger, it's a different kind of dynamic that you need. And you need to think about it. But up to 70 folks on a Zoom meeting can work, having working well for us.
Yeah. Laura, you brought up something that I want to come back to because I want to hear from Leanna, but you brought up this issue with it's a free training, registration doesn't match who shows up. And so that is a topic I want to come back to, as well as a couple of questions in the Q&A. But Leanna, what broad problems or challenges have you all faced with Neuromatch when delivering effective virtual training, and what have you done about them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is exactly what Laura described, like engagement, cameras off. Our groups are a lot bigger on the topic of numbers. So we cap our registration at 500 and we get about 150 to 180 people at our sessions. So breakout rooms especially are really important for us. And And especially from the get-go, like our class, we spread it out across 5 days over a single week, 2 hours a day. And so that first session, within the first 15 to 20 minutes, we're in a breakout room already with just like a super easy question. Like, what are you using? What are you using open science practices for? And if you're not using them, what would you like to use them for? And usually easy questions like that are a good way to get people to start, talking about their own experiences and get them to start being engaged with
Yeah.
material.
Yeah. So this brings us actually perfectly to our next question. We're going to talk about a couple of specifics. And as part of those specifics, I also want to address our previous question about the registration, the virtual training being something free for our audience and having low commitment. But this question goes into specific methods or technologies that we've used to boost engagement. And I know we've already talked about, right, things like the chat, things like breakout rooms, and I'm curious if there's anything else that you would add to that list for methods or technologies. As far as myself for methods, because we've identified that engagement is something that is very important, and I am just a single person in front of a classroom, of 80 to 90 students. And so what I often do is, well, one, I have a couple of teaching assistants, and I ensure that those teaching assistants are always typing something into the chat, either reacting to something I've said or reacting to something that somebody else has said. And so really trying to pump life into the chats is, I think, something that's very important because it makes the group feel more involved. The more you get them talking, the more they're going to pay attention. But Leanna, Laura, anything else aside from those couple of things or other techniques or approaches that you've used?
Yeah, a lot of my focus in particular is thinking about the fact that open science isn't necessarily something that you should be sitting in a classroom for and then you log off and then you're done and then you just do it on your own. Obviously, community building is a huge part of what we do. So we actually have a Discord server where our current course participants as well as our course alumni are all in there. And they just enjoy being part of a community like that. I mean, and I see it as a success, even if all someone does in the Discord server is go to the networking channel and share their LinkedIn and start clicking through everyone else's LinkedIn and start adding each other. I count that as a success because that means that they're opening up their open science communities in that sort of way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And having that kind of asynchronous, external chat is amazing because you can get them asking questions, a week after their course ends or a week after they adjourn with each other. Whereas, like, if you just use the Zoom chat, right, the chat's there for the session, they might be able to maybe see somebody's initials because not everybody puts their full name. So you don't know who specifically you're talking to. So breaking down that barrier of figuring out who you've been interacting with and then establishing a real connection with them, I think is important. And fostering that through something like Discord or a similar tool is a great approach. But Laura, anything that you want to add on top of that?
Well, it's you've covered pretty much. I want to add something that I mentioned before. This is the formative assessments every 10-15 minutes of content. So to make sure you prompt folks. Definitely not teaching. I mean, don't teach alone. And having folks interacting on the chat, as you mentioned, it's something that we do. And also the community building for those that cannot be maybe in the synchronous. We use Slack, but like Discord would do as well. But I wanted to add the formative assessment, which is a tool that it's having an activity with a query to make sure that content goes from the working memory. But I'm talking to folks that know a lot more about memory than me. I'm just the simplest. A simple
Consolidation
bias.
theory is still leading. You're good. You're all in good. Right.
Okay, good. Phew. But I wanted to add, these are not. Well, I don't want to contradict you folks, but I don't think these are that innovative. I mean, these are tricks that educational science has been telling us for decades in the literature, right? I mean, they work and they are pretty simple hacks,
Mhm.
if you wish, for active learning. So I was fearing with the innovative methods to be leaning on something like more AI-ish,
Mind-blowing.
if
Yeah.
which
Oh,
I don't
AI-ish.
know.
Oh, kind of cutting edge technology use.
Maybe, yeah, but this is so it is innovative because folks have, I mean, like not a lot of folks use it, maybe, but it's been there forever. Educators know this, so
Hmm.
um, just that I wanted to add that one.
Yeah. I think one thing that my group does that's maybe slightly different than how some of the other groups operate is I get really bored when somebody's lecturing just, for 3 hours, either nonstop or broken up, with attention checks or something like that. And so what I always do for every topic that I do, I try to incorporate about a 20-minute demonstration or actually do the thing that I'm telling them about. And so, for like open software, open code sections, like we talk about version control in Git, but I can't think of anything more abstract than just talking about Git and version control. And so I say, let me show you my terminal. Mind you that understanding the specific commands that I'm typing in is not important, but I'm going to draw your attention to what I have done and why am I doing it. And so I incorporate demonstrations in there. And so hopefully that's at least services to a portion of our audience who's a little bit more visual and likes having something to follow along the screen aside from some static text. Excellent. All right, well, let's jump into our next question. And this question has to do with a little bit more with open science concepts. Specifically, has anything open science related impacted your approach to virtual training? And so maybe at the end, and this is something I really want to do and I need to do, but at the end of your trainings, do you say upload your slides to Zenodo or a similar archival tool so that anybody can then cite them for future use? But I'll open this up to our panel. Laura, it looks like you have something to say first, and Leanna second.
Yeah, well, one of our demos, we do have those. It's just has been to how to link GitHub and DOIs and to how to set a digital object identifier (DOI) to your GitHub repo, and we
Mhm.
do give a demo on that, and we had folks saying, "Oh, I had this bit of code, I didn't know this could be done," and even one person said, "Oh, I have set it up during the training."
Mhm.
And at the end, I mean, our last encounter for our virtual cohorts for NASA Tops. Um, since our groups, there's a lot of willingness to participate and want to tell their own stories, and because we do have folks with a lot of experience. It's not just folks learning open science for the first time, but
Yes.
we are tackling folks from mostly our audience. I mean, it comes from 26 countries around the world so far. And so it includes the Americas, Western Europe, even India. I'm looking at the data as I speak. So uh, they, and up to 70% of the folks have some experience with research already. And a lot of them have heard about open science, but never
Mhm.
open science by NASA
Yeah.
or in this way. So what we get is they have oh, I've been doing this but in a different way. Does this count as open science as well? There's a lot of regional knowledge that
Mhm.
comes in during the first 5 encounters where we teach the curriculum, the NASA curriculum for the Open Science 101. So the last encounter, it's their turn to participate. So they present, I mean, a handful of folks, about 10% of the folks that participate are invited to, like, in 5 minutes, tell me about how you've been adopting open science and what your project looks like, and what you have learned in our during this teaching, and what would you do different, and let us ask you questions and learn from you. So the last encounter, the last meeting, the last session is them taking the mic, our trainees taking the mic, and we are learning as much more through that. And that interaction from the different groups, it's really rich. And and give us a lot of materials on how open science has been done outside of NASA for quite a couple of decades in some cases.
Awesome. And Leanna, how about you? Have you started incorporating any open science principles right into the virtual training aside from teaching the concepts themselves?
Yeah, so this has been a big part of Neuromatch from the beginning, actually. Every course that we have, even beyond that in open science, all of our materials are openly accessible. We host our slide decks on OSF, things like that. So like everything that we're doing, you can find by going to our website at any time. And, we maintain that access as well. So, if we have an alumnus of our program, we always tell them at the end of the course that they can always count on being able to go to that website and the materials will still be there as long as we exist.
Yeah.
Sorry, one thing I omitted is like that the presentations for the plenary at the end are all CC by and uploaded. So we put together a collective deck that everyone puts their slides there, and we do publish it and with the permission. So we do exemplify how to do it in case they don't know yet. So that's a bit I forgot. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, Laura, you reminded me something a little bit earlier when you said, we get people from all different backgrounds and experience with research in open science. The first thing I do when I start a class for the day is I always say hello and welcome to everyone. And then I guide them on how to use the chat and the Q&A. And I say, so if you already know a lot of these open science topics and concepts, please do, give us some additional maybe tooling or ideas in the chat. I'll sit up here and I'll talk about Zenodo as an example for there's hundreds of other products just like it, all for free. And then somebody will chime in and say, oh, I use Harvard Dataverse. It offers this, this, and this feature. And I'm like, amazing. That's great for all of the other students there as well. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's a huge part of what we do as well, actually. Like we're constantly pausing and asking people to put in the chat, like if you use any data sets, like a lot of our students are neuroscientists. So if you use any data sets, drop those in the chat. And I've been trying really hard to get people to translate that from Zoom chat to the Discord. And for some reason, that's not connecting. So I think for the next one in a couple of weeks, I'm just going to try like compiling it all myself or something, or having some sort of class project where, hey, we're going to have this document or whatever, and all of the resources that you use, we're going to put them here instead of making them click over to Discord to try to keep it more permanent.
Exactly what we are experiencing as well with Slack. And we've been compiling and sharing a document, virtual cohort from virtual cohort. So the document keeps, and it's not the best way, but we need to figure out a different way but at least it's compiled all in one place. And I think it's a great resource because in our case, it does share alternatives in Latin America that you might not know of, because usually there's no funding to go out and communicate what you do. I mean, you have at least enough funding. Sometimes you just have enough funding to do the thing, and then having funding to be able to communicate it well and put it out there so others knowing can be shortcoming when you're low resourced. So we are trying to give that service. We'll see where it will go at the end. I mean, because we keep adding cohorts.
Yeah. Now, before we jump into the next kind of prepped question, we have a lot of questions in the Q&A widget, and we also had our discussion about you get 150 people registered, but only 70 show up. And so I'd like to start with that question. And I'm curious, Laura, what practices or approaches have you taken when you have, 150 people registered, but only 70 show up?
I don't have. I am very curious about what others have done. I heard having almost 50% of the folks joining, it's a big win because like the magic number on this case scenario seemed to be 30%. I mean, only a third of folks that sign up usually show up to a free, completely free event. Some alternatives that I've seen folks use is like set a $5 fee or something like it's symbolic, and I'm using quotes here because you'll hear my opinion in a bit about that. So that $5 may help you, can compromise to show up. In the case of our audience and the principles MetaDocencia and the values MetaDocencia runs on, any even symbolic amount acts as a barrier of access. And because it's sometimes not easy peasy to go to your credit card and put it in a international platform, and even if it's $5, even if you have the $5, it can be very, very tricky. So that one is not an option for us. One option that I mean, the other day someone from the team said, if I knew this training costed, say, I don't know, a random number, $500 or $1,000 per person to take, then I would be more serious signing up and committing my time to it and not taking the spot from for another person. We do communicate, hey, be very mindful. If you cannot do the commitment, we understand there's going to be other cohorts, but every spot you sign up, you're taking the spot for someone else. And let us know if you, and we do give opportunities to folk to come down, so to open the registration again, to maximize those who come. So all of that we do. Still, our show up is low. So we might start an experimentation saying, if you had to pay for this, it would cost this amount. You don't have to pay for it because NASA is paying for it. But don't confuse free for low quality, or because I think there's also an association. Oh, if it is free, maybe it is lower quality than if I had to pay. And it's not the case for this virtual cohort. So that's something I still need, we still need to try, but that's the latest idea we're toying with. I'll be curious to know how you folks tackle this one.
Yeah. Leanna, same question to you. How do you maintain high registration and high attendance for your cohorts, which are quite large?
Yeah, so for us, we know that 30% statistic is the reality. And we really don't fight too much against that. What I really like to focus my efforts on is, okay, we have 5 days of the course. How many people showed up on day 1 and how many people showed up on day 5? If there is a big drop off there, then we need to do some self-reflection on our course and make sure that we're keeping it engaging and exciting. Usually we have a drop off of about 20 to 30 people, which isn't the worst when you have high numbers like that, but definitely something that we're still working on. I guess if you are interested in tackling that 30% statistic and making it a bit higher for your group, one thing that I've thought of, and I haven't decided if I'm going to do it yet or not, is like assigning a small group for the course that you do ahead of time. So you have your course registrants, you break them up into groups and you say, this is going to be your group for the course. And in your breakout rooms, like this is who you'll be with. So it kind of introduces that like sort of peer accountability there. So for us, we have so many people that would be a big lift for us, and we don't have TAs that could supervise each of those groups. So it probably won't be something that comes to fruition for us, but it is something that I have thought about.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a great idea, the groups, something to get them involved in the training before the training actually starts. I know for us personally, we see that 30% statistic or 30 to 50% statistic of registration to attendance. And right now, our primary focus is on maintaining attendance. when we first started running the cohorts, we had about a week, or even for some very early on cohorts, we had 2 weeks between sessions 1 and 2, or earlier on, we had sessions 1, 2, and 3. And we found out that just because you can show up Monday of week 1 does not mean you can show up Monday of week 2 or Monday of week 3. And we recently had a lot more success where we did back-to-back days, where we actually saw, I think, 0 or really close to 0 people drop off between the 2 sessions, which is a big one in my book. I'll let you know if it continues that trend, though. Yeah, fingers crossed, exactly. All right, let's jump into some of the questions from the audience. So first up, we have a very interesting question about helping learners who want to embrace open science, but might require a little bit more hands-on attention or mentorship. And I'm curious if either of your programs offer some type of peer or paired mentor approach, or if you say, we unfortunately, as much as I would love to, we don't have the resources to do that because that level of individualized attention comes at a significant time cost.
Yeah, exactly that. You know, we're doing what we can right now, getting some data about the effectiveness of our cohorts right now and seeing if this is something that people enjoy. And if we can get more funding for something like this, then maybe that's something that we'll consider for the future. But as it stands right now, the reality of the situation is we do not have the person power or the funds to support mentorship in that capacity.
Yeah, in our case, it's also not done explicitly. It started, I mean, when we planned for this, we thought about having mentorship in between sessions for the contents. Reality is we are not doing that right now. However, the way that we offer is through community building, and come to the Slack, tell us what your problem is, your question, and whatever. If you have, we do open the community space, and if it happens in MetaDocencia Slack, then we can tackle some of the questions or connect folks that, well, you might want to talk to that other person from the other cohort that have done this, or we try to do it in that way. It's not one-on-one mentoring,
Yeah,
but it's you know on its way.
yeah.
But for now, I mean, yeah, that's all we've been doing. How are you, Gabriel?
So we don't do individual one-on-one mentoring. However, I do try my best if people either message me on LinkedIn or our Discord or anything to message them back, strike up whatever conversation or answer any questions they have to the best of my ability. But this, of course, is not individual mentorship where we're actually having regular meetings. We do, however, offer our TAs to meet with students who are unable to complete the course for one reason or another and would still like to complete the course. And so this will often have one of our TAs go with a couple of topics at hand that student had missed, just to help them carry them kind of over the finish line and make sure that if they're excited about getting their badge, they can get their badge. And tick off that they've completed the course, because sometimes although we can fit them into a later cohort, then you have to wait a month, or maybe you're not available that day and then you have to wait 2 months because we do monthly classes. And so we try to save them a little bit of headache by offering up a little bit of individual time so that they can meet with one of our teaching assistants and cover anything that they missed or get any questions that they had addressed.
Yeah, office hours after we have been offering those as well. And I think that the Open Science Plenary that we call the last event really helps connecting folks to other folks and experiences between them. So we will keep, one of the pillars for MetaDocencia is community building in addition to training. So we will keep exploring that avenue next year and try, I mean, as we continue to know about initiatives that are well advanced in open science. So it doesn't have to be MetaDocencia teaching this all the time. So we invoke the power of the community, and hopefully, I mean, it takes time to build, though. It's
Yeah,
not something that you can do over a few weeks.
absolutely. So another question that we had come up in our chat had to do with the groups that we brought up a little bit earlier in our conversation. And this individual wanted to know how to identify and spark curiosity amongst these groups for further engagement. So I think the case here is sometimes even with things like small groups, you'll get those individuals who are resistant to really doing or participating. Is there anything to try and reach those individuals? Or you say at the end of the day, you are in charge of your own learning. If you actually want to learn, you will. And if you don't, you just want to check your emails while sitting in on a class, feel free to.
Some folks will, I mean, there's a percentage of folks that will that will never be part of it, and that's okay, because I mean, and I can identify with that learner myself. I've been a very passive learner throughout my career sometimes, but that's okay. For those that do not, I mean, sometimes it's just out of shyness because I don't know you and stuff like that. So for breakout rooms, what we do is, if we notice there's not a I mean, at the beginning, some of the breakout rooms come through. I mean, at the end, we do ask for feedback. At the end of each encounter, we do have feedback. What did go well? I mean, one thing to keep, one thing to change. And sometimes it's, well, I was in the breakout room that nobody talked. So we do send them to, and I see Leanna nodding, like feeling the pain too. Because yes, it's painful for trainers to have the class not go as planned, in case trainees are hearing me out here. So we do, to counteract that and to help with that, we have been trying to assign the folks that we know can moderate. There's a number of folks from MetaDocencia in each call. So we do divide ourselves and have some tips to try to moderate the room and try to get it started. And then we try to keep it in the same group throughout the session. And that has helped. But sometimes you are unlucky, and then all the folks have very unstable connections and they just cannot do it, and that's fine too. But help, choosing your rooms wisely and not moderate. Someone with experience moderating can help to break the ice.
Yeah, in our last cohort, we tried to experiment with a couple different things. So we had discussion-based breakout rooms, we had activity-based breakout rooms, and then we also had some activities where everyone just stayed in the main room and kind of worked through things together. And then the facilitator shared their screen and worked through that as well. And we asked about that on our course evaluation survey. It was like 50% really liked that mixed approach. They liked having different options. 25% wanted to be exclusively in breakout rooms, and 25% wanted to exclusively be doing individual activities. So I think we hit a good mix there in terms of satisfying as many people as we could, but I thought I would share numbers.
Yeah, with those discrete measures, right? Counting people, you got to go with either majority or median of some sort. It's impossible to please everyone equally, but we try our absolute best, and that's the important part. Now, we also have another question that's come in, and I would love to hear both your thoughts. I'll share my thoughts on this first, because it's a question about massive online courses. And so, in your opinions, do you think MOOCs are a good form of teaching or training? My take on this is this. I do think that MOOCs are a good form of teaching or training. However, it is highly dependent on the learner and what the learner's experience is with what I call self-teaching. Because I'm the type of student where if you saw me in undergraduate or graduate school, give me the textbook, I'm more than happy to read the textbook and try and figure out anything that I don't know. But some people do really appreciate classroom style setting, having somebody that you can ask questions to at any point about any topic, depending on your teacher. And so that serves to their benefit. So I will say MOOCs are a good resource. However, they are not fit for everyone because everyone learns a little bit differently and everybody has that optimal environment. Maybe sitting in your sweatpants at your house on your laptop is not going to facilitate your learning. But I would love to hear, Laura, Leanna, what your thoughts are on self-teaching or MOOCs.
I had to agree with you, Cameron. On if you learn how to teach yourself, uh, m- maybe that's what you prefer. It is my case as well, but it's not the case. And there's some folks that never had the opportunity to be taught how to teach themselves, because that's a skill that you learn through having really great teachers before.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think, well, maybe someone is born with that skill, but I know I learned it um, from great teachers, and if I am really, my intrinsic motivation is high, then I can learn anything on myself, on my and then maybe having access to an expert or two, and to ask questions, because the books don't answer questions. So it is, sometimes you do need that feedback. And so I'm ambivalent about the MOOC. My experience with the MOOC, being someone with high metacognition and know how to teach, it's like it's very gamify. I mean, it can be very adhering to click on the different, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean. I mean, and then stay there as a game, and then I discovered that I didn't learn as much as if I interacted with others. So MOOCs are good complements, I mean, in my opinion, or in my experience. If that's the only mean that you have available, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
But I like them as complements, because I think the exchange with other humans, I mean, there's a cognitive side to learning and there's a social side to learning. And the social side of speaking to others about the thing, it's key. There's a lot
Yeah.
of fora out there, and you can find it through other means. Uh, but MOOCs are still missing that part in my experience.
Yeah. I absolutely agree with that, right? The MOOC, or a textbook, right? It's easy to just read, skim over, and say, okay, that makes sense. But unless you write about it or you have discourse with somebody, meaning, right, you converse with another person, right? Those are the two best and easiest ways that you think about a topic without realizing you're thinking about a topic. And so I honestly do think that unless you've written about something, you probably don't understand it. Or unless you've had a lot of conversations about something, you probably don't understand it because you haven't really had to think too deeply about a topic.
Well, best way to learn something is to teach it. Uh, and another way is to put your hands on it. I mean, so do a project, and get really involved and get your hands dirty and get to do what you learn. And at that point, you learn what you thought you learned, but you didn't learn. So it's very easy with a MOOC to have that feeling of superficial learning. And then when you need the knowledge, it's not there. But sorry, Leanna, it was your turn, and I took.
No worries. I just wanted this to add in here too that not all MOOCs are created equal. I have done some that were really well put together, had really, I felt that they had really engaging activities, even if I wasn't doing them in a group. It's very clear that it was thought out in a way that they were doing the best they could with the infrastructure that they had. If you are just throwing a bunch of text or videos at us and not even giving any sort of guidance on what I can do to take that information home, then it's probably not useful to me. It's probably not useful to many other people out there. Another thing I wanted to say about this too is I think I would really like if more MOOCs had sort of like a hybrid kind of situation where, yes, you're doing it on your own, but you're doing it on your own at the same time as other people. So maybe you can, interact with those people on like a Discord or whatever and start sharing your notes that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've actually done one of those hybrid courses when I was learning SQL a number of years ago, and I thought it was really neat because you got the opportunity to interact with other students and also see what type of code other people are writing and see how far off you've gotten by trying to teach yourself something. But it's good experience. Now we do just have 6 minutes left. So I did want to open this up to have just one more question discussed, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. And I am curious, we've touched on this just a little bit, but what strategies do you use to maintain engagement and motivation, especially for extended training topics? So I'll often talk about having to work on or having to teach Git. And I always preface it with, if you have never used Git before, you are not going to learn it because I have an hour to teach it, right? So I'm just going to talk about why version control. And so that's kind of I set the expectations, right? It's going to feel a little fast paced. It's going to feel a little overwhelming, but these are very important concepts to be exposed to. And honestly, I think it's one of those topics that you need to hear about multiple times before things start clicking. And so I'm curious, what strategies do you all use to maintain engagement, especially with long topics or complex topics?
There is one other device we use, which is to keep folks motivated through different sessions, okay? And not to teach a complex topic, but we do run surveys after we allowed the last 10 minutes, the last 5 minutes of each meeting online to run a survey and give us something to keep and something to change. And what we do next after everyone is gone is read it and make sure to give the feedback. So 2 days after that, there's a summary of, and it's anonymous feedback that we get. So they can say anything to us. There's no, and so we do give them feedback on the feedback and say, hey, thank you for all the great things you've told to us. We really love this and that too. You ask us to have a longer break or a shorter session or more materials shared or more breakout rooms or something. So this is how we're going to tackle that. Or we cannot tackle it until the next cohort, but thank you for your input because you're helping us improve. So that has been, and giving back the feedback and saying how we are tackling the things have been key to the engagement long term, because what they tell us, we show we care. So showing you care about individuals that are attending your online, and then the more individually you can do it, the to show your care, the higher your engagement, in my experience. Calling people by their names, it's another one. If you pay attention who is there, and if someone is nodding, you say, thank you, Cameron, for that nod, then folks also feel they belong better. So
yeah,
2 tricks.
Yeah, I think this kind of goes back to the theme that you identified, Laura, of like, we're talking about innovative methods of teaching, but it's not really. These ideas have been around from the beginning. That's what the experts have decided on. Things like treating your students like they're humans, or breaking up your course material into smaller chunks and having activities in the middle. Like, it's tried and true. You just got to do it, because that is what the experts have identified as the ways to do it. And I don't know if we will ever get better than that.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Leanna. Now we do have 2 minutes left. Leanna, Laura, I want to give you the opportunity to share with everyone your contact information or your group's organization information in the chat, so people know how to get signed up with Open Science training through you. And while you do that, Leanna, I wanted to build off of your last point, right? Although we're not always using the latest cutting thing from, education research, I will say this, as somebody who is a researched memory, oftentimes people ask me, Cameron, you studied memory, why is my memory so bad, or how can I improve it? And I say, if you actually want to improve your memory, you don't really need to look at the most recent papers. Go back to the 90s, go back to the 2000s. All of the research says is the most boring things that you can think of. If you want to remember something, pay attention. No, that's the easiest, the best thing that you can do. If you want to remember something, pay attention. We've known this not for the last 5 years, not even for the last 30, probably more. If you want to remember something, or if you want to get better at something, practice it, right? And so you have this idea of repetition, and we get into a couple of other strategies, but I promise you, memory strategies are not that cutting edge or crazy. It's things you already know, unless you're talking about some very niche types of memorization. But Laura, any final words before we close out?
Yes, for our audience, when you encounter this new device in education and this new hack and cutting edge and whatever modern, super modern, make sure there is evidence behind it proving that it works, like randomized trial run by someone who has not have a conflict of interest behind the new tool. So, and a couple of replications. So that's all I wanted to leave out there for innovation, because there's a lot of innovation in education all the time, and the tricks are still the good old ones we know.
Absolutely. And Leanna, any final words or thoughts, whether related or just overall to our discussion we've had before we adjourn?
I don't think so. I don't want to hold people over time. So I just wanted to thank you for being here, everyone, and thank you for hosting us. Don't use this code.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Leanna. Thank you so much for Laura joining. It has been a pleasure having this discussion with you. And to our audience, do make sure that you connect with Leanna, Laura, and myself on LinkedIn. Check out our organizations and any upcoming open science trainings if you're looking for that. Thanks to all who have joined, and I hope to see you around real soon.
Thank you.